Welcome, everybody. It is so great to see you and to see so many of you here. This is a webinar sponsored by the Maryland Online Leadership Institute. We're also known as MOLLI. And my name is Shinta Hernandez, and I am the MOLLI Director. And I am also the founding dean of the virtual campus at Montgomery College. We're located here in Montgomery County, Maryland. And from what I see a lot of us spread across the country and the North America, really. So this is really nice to see. The interest is certainly far and wide, and we appreciate that you're here choosing to spend your hour with us and to learn a whole lot about strategic planning for online learning success. But before we get started, I wanted to just give you all a brief history of the MOLLI Professional Development. This particular webinar is a part of the larger Leadership Talk webinar series. And Leadership Talk webinar series, along with some workshops that we are offering year-round, they're all a part of our newly redesigned MOLLI Professional Development. At the end of the academic year in June, there's also going to be an in-person retreat that is open to all of you. So please stay tuned for communications about that. We do hope that you will be able to participate. And that retreat is in person on site here at Montgomery College in Maryland. So if you're able to find your way over here, we would love to have you be a part of those conversations. Now, before I introduce you to our presenter and our partner, I do want to share a few housekeeping. There will be a post-webinar survey toward the end of the session, and I will share that link with you along with the QR code at the end in the chat. And there will be an opportunity to ask our presenter some questions as well. Toward the end, I will also share with you the rest of the MOLLI PD so that you have a chance to see what other opportunities we are offering in our MOLLI space, and you can register for those events right away. So now I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing to you our presenter and our facilitator. So our presenter is Stephen Kabrhel, is the Dean of Online Learning at the Community College of Baltimore County, also known as CCBC, also located here in Maryland. He's on the board of Maryland Online and is the chair of the Chief Officers of Online Learning Council. And I'll tell you, the acronym of that council is COOL. So he is the chair of the COOL Council, probably one of the coolest councils there is. Among many of the hats that he wears in higher education. And our facilitator is Dr. Renee Davis. She is the Associate Vice President of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Frederick Community College, also located here in Maryland. She completed the residential program that was sponsored by the Maryland Online Leadership Institute back in 2019, which is the same year that I completed the program. So that's how I came to know Renee. And Renee has just been actively involved in all things MOLLI since then. So I certainly appreciate that she is here facilitating this webinar. So really, without further ado, let us welcome Steve Kabrhel and Renee Davis. Floor is all yours.
All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Shinta said, I am Dr. Renee Davis. It is my pleasure to be the facilitator of this amazing webinar, All Things Online Learning and Distance Education, that we get to spend this time with Steve this morning. So I would turn it over to Steve for a second because we would like to make an acknowledgement before we proceed.
Certainly. Thanks, Renee and Shinta. And I'm sure all of you know of the tragedy with the Key Bridge yesterday. For those of you that are not in Maryland, the Key Bridge is one of 4 ways to get in and around the city of Baltimore. We are certainly thinking of those families of the missing and for those that are injured. And it's going to be a lot of work to recover. And as you've probably read, the local economy very well may be affected. And I think that at CCBC, that Key Bridge is a connection between us and Anne Arundel County, just to our south. And we see a lot of folks that come through that port, that come through that bridge, that work locally, that we provide and assist services for. And I know our president will say, when she reaches out, that it's our mission as a community college to support those that are in need in that area. So I just want to simply recognize the tragedy, and we're thinking of all of them, and we're anxious to get started here. So thank you for that moment.
Absolutely. Our hearts and prayers go out to all of the individuals impacted by the tragedy of yesterday. So, without further ado, I'd like to start with the first question. Steve, are you ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on, Renee.
All right now. So, would you be able to share your journey that led you to the current position and provide an overview of recent developments at your institution?
Absolutely. So I joined CCBC in 2001, and not long after that, um, because the college worked with Towson University, and they had a curriculum and instruction training, and so it came to us that we were interested in doing some online learning courses. And so right away, I ended up taking this training they had and developing a nutrition course online. And that ran actually from 2002 and still continues to run. Um, and for those of you that don't know, Maryland Online, as was mentioned earlier, was born from a number of the participants in the community college, CCBC being one. And I didn't know at that time that that training itself would become part of what ultimately is Quality Matters and the Quality Matters training. At least that's the basis for it. So, what has brought me to being a dean is first as a faculty member. And I think that really is important so that I know what I experienced as a faculty member, what my needs were as an online faculty member. And then I had various positions along the way that assisted in sort of developing what we have right now. I was fortunate enough to be a senator in our shared governance system for about 8 years. That timing went with an evaluation that the college did of what distance education then was, and it sort of all coalesced around 2009, where we actually made some recommendations to our vice president of instruction to say, here are some needs that we have if we're going to continue to provide and support distance learning activities at the college. And so I was able to not only work as a faculty member, as a senator, then a department chair, and a person that there was an advisory board that really was the sort of leadership or think tank at that time. Because I think it's important to illustrate how online learning set up in our hierarchy. And I'm sure a number of you at various institutions have seen this. Online learning up until about 2016 really had two areas that it focused on and was sort of in charge of. One was IT, and that was the learning management system, but also the Office of Instruction. So our director at the time and the folks that served underneath it sort of had two angles. Well, who do we answer to? The LMS, instructional design, what do we do? So there really wasn't a lot of strong leadership. We had some strong instructional designers. We had a director that also pushed for some changes and updates. And so really all those factors sort of coalesced. And ultimately what has brought us here are those efforts, but really supported by our president, Dr. Sandra Kurtinitis, who many of you know of. She realized that there was more to online learning than just providing the courses, that at least from CCBC's perspective, she wanted to be the one to take, the service that we do for the community and provide that to others, because we had a size to do that. And so in 2016, late 2016, 2017, she said, we're going to bring in a dean. We're going to create a department that was strictly for online learning, brought the LMS team from IT. Interestingly, and we'll talk about this a little later on, that now executive dean is now vice president and actually sits separately from the Office of Instruction. So we have a unique organization in that in most places and folks that I talk to, online learning is either under IT or it sits in academic affairs in some way, shape, or form. We are a little bit different as vice president of enrollment management and outreach. And I think that does it really benefits what we do, because while we're not directly tied into academic affairs directly, I still have to work with all of those folks. And so to have separate leadership sort of helps as a check and balance, right? To sort of keep us all organized. So not long after that, I was brought in as a faculty member, as an assistant dean. And as we continued to grow and we realigned, I became dean of online learning. So that's really how we sit right now. So we are the Department of Online Learning. Our sort of marketing name is CCBC Online. When we do our marketing, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So from there, sort of our biggest things that have happened recently. So we launched CCBC Online in 2018. We transitioned to a new learning management system right at the tail end of COVID. So that was fun. We began nationwide marketing early in 2023. And we created a new partnership, one of which we're very excited about, with Acadian, which is an online, it's a large up and coming higher ed institution. They do seat sharing, much like Maryland Online does, but they have lots of other ventures to try and support learners. And as if that wasn't enough, we're currently undergoing a redesign of our entire student journey and installing a CRM. So there's only a few things happening with us right now. But you'll see as we get through some of these questions, why all those things will be important. You'd say, well, maybe that does or does not directly affect what we do in online learning, but you'll see how they're integrated as we work our way through. But so we've had an interesting journey as we come through from the individual courses back in 2001. We actually had 3. I mean, they were really distance ones, to now. And we have 70 programs fully online. We have another 30 or 40 that you could do in a blended format, almost 500 individual credit courses that can be taken online or in a blended format, 475 thereabouts, continuing education, workforce development courses. So pretty strong.
Absolutely. And so tagging back, you mentioned your president, Sandra Curtinitis. Considering that she has been pivotal in advocating for online learning, how do you see your institution prior to that lacking, or institutions lacking such leadership, and how they support and navigate the transition to online education? So with that very essential support from your president, how do you see this impacting institutions who may not have that type of support and leadership at that level? And what does that mean for those institutions and how they move this work forward in the online space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a common conversation that when we go to conferences and we talk about, or we see presentations, or even if you take some of the surveys that come out, the hierarchy is all over the place. So we were really fortunate that the president said, look, I see this as mission critical, not just for students, but also for the college, right? And I think a lot of us before 2020 saw that as enrollments dipping. We need to find a new way to bring that in, but we can also support what we do. And so the second thing she did, besides announcing all this, is this became part of the strategic plan, was to grow online enrollment through whatever that means. So a number of colleges that are relatively large, that sort of have a footprint, have that built into the strategic plan. For those that are smaller colleges and community colleges, I think there really needs to be a look first and foremost, is that what is something that is key to our strategic management? I think a lot of colleges have looked at it as we did a little bit, which was, we need this for revenue because we know it's something that's growing. And certainly post-pandemic, we saw a surge, and now we see it come down, and it's flattened, but still continues to grow a little bit. We're a little bit above that. So I think colleges really need to, from a mission critical and mission matching, does that match the mission of the institution? So that's the first thing. And then if you don't have a president, or even vice presidents or associate vice presidents that then champion that, it's finding those individuals that might be a champion. And that could be a cluster of faculty that say, look, we know the value of this, we do good work, we've presented on this. And it's trying to find those levels in leadership that say there's value to this. And whoever that group happens to be, it's saying, look, this is part of what we do as our mission. We should see this as part of our strategic plan. We can see this as an enrollment growth. So there's a number of ways that I think institutions that don't happen to have or have had that benefit that CCBC has had if it fits that way, there will be champions of this, because we know online learning is not going away. Even if folks say, well, it's a temporary thing, or, success rates aren't that great, or does it really suit the learners? All of these things, we know it's here to stay in some way, shape, or form. And I would never suggest that an institution go out of their way to do something like this, or smaller or large, if it doesn't fit what they need to do, because it needs to fit part and parcel, because you need to have infrastructure, you need to have funds available for marketing if that's the case, you need to have um, uh, quality assurance, you need to be able to support your faculty in all the ways that they need it, and so it takes a lot of staff and resources to be able to do that, regardless of what level it is.
Mhm.
And then I think the last thing I would say is too is probably in that sort of who is the champion, it's figuring out where that sits. And I don't know of the institutions that are here whether it sits under an IT world or not. That always gets, again, this is just speaking from others in my experience earlier, that can be narrow-minded, and I don't mean to say anything negative about the IT staff, because they're integral, but they may not see the broad picture of what, not just the academic side, but the student services side of things. So really, they all play a vital role. IT does, administrative service, student services, they all play an integral role in growing and developing what this is. Maybe it's three of those coming together to form a body. That's what we did prior to the president saying we're going to do this. We had an advisory board, and most of the policies that we proposed got passed by our shared governance system. That's what we have, and now are the bedrock of online learning. And we just now have a different method to either support this, implement this, or advise to bring more policy on. So it's going
Absolutely.
to vary.
Wonderful. So I have two follow-up questions in
Yep.
regards to what you mentioned, Steve. And one of them is related to COVID, which is always the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
And the other one is to the changing landscape around online learning and the rules and policies that are being
Yeah.
developed around that. So with a very established online unit at your institution, and with your president being that advocate, how are you managing and navigating the political landscape of where we find ourselves in online learning? And then how has COVID readjusted or helped you rebrand the way in which online learning is offered at your institution?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the easy one first, which is the rebranding one. Um, it fit actually with what we had always intended. So we were ready for that, right? We had to scale what was the basic need, which basically was training the faculty to deliver online content. And what we were able to do was support faculty and get them through the training that already existed for developing an online facilitating or teaching an online course. So that was number one. We had a number of courses that we had to develop. And so we used our resources to try and develop some courses live. But the third thing we do is we went and we created, some people call it streaming, we called it remote synchronous. We trained faculty on how to develop their lectures live. And while that's sort of like, let's take the classroom, let's put it virtual, and then we'll bring them back. What we're seeing now is that trend is actually, we're seeing more enrollments in that synchronous. So if it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the classroom, it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday virtual. And we're seeing some good successes that way. And what we've just encountered right now is we're starting to see, and we call them blended and not hybrids at our institution. Traditionally, blended is it's a asynchronous with an in-class, right, or an on-campus. That has now changed. We've actually upgraded that to it's an asynchronous plus a remote online. So now we're actually able to serve students at a distance, wherever that happens to be, while giving them a live component that helps, with them. Because not all students are ready to take that completely asynchronous, and having some live factors. And there's certain degrees, which maybe we'll get into later, that really suit themselves for that modality of having that combination. So we shifted in the short term to changing our resources to straight up training. What we're finding now is that we need to come back. There are a lot more courses that were developed that we haven't seen, or didn't work in tandem with our instructional design team. So we're developing and revamping our quality assurance processes for those. So that's the first part. So from a political landscape, internally, nothing much has changed, sort of related that way, right? It's still the same mission. And there certainly has been, from a faculty perspective, a concern of, are we going to go completely online and sort of forego our bread and butter, which is our face-to-face? And the president, the administration was very clear, we're never going to do that. And we haven't done that. We're going to continue to grow online, but we're always going to be that brick and mortar institution. We've been lucky enough to then get support from both the county and the state for that. And that's always been a critical piece as well. And our county particularly has looked at, online learning and said, well, is it part of the mission? It is. So we will fund the things that you need, whether it's been specifically, positions, so that way. So we've had support along the way. But I think as you take a look at online learning more broadly and you say, what about the changes in residency and changes that taking attendance and substantial participation, those are things we continue to look at. We've actually had a how do you judge attendance for financial aid purposes or other. And that's part of our routine that comes from our registrar's office. And there has been Senate policy that generally said, here's what substantial activity is, or sustained activity in an online class, so that we're meeting what those demands are. And as they change, we're now recognizing that we need to look at that a little bit further. And in most cases, these type of policies come through our shared governance system. Same thing with accessibility. And that sort of as a sideline to your question, what I bring that up is right now, there's a law that everything we have to meet that compliance for digital accessibility.
Absolutely.
Well, sitting right now in our shared governance system is a policy that we put forward that says everything that goes into the learning management system must be accessible. And what's interesting is that the faculty, for the most part, don't have a problem with that. But what they are feeling challenged by as well is, does that have to happen right away? So internally, to meet those nationwide standards, I think there's some internal angst with our faculty about how do we meet that. And so where I sit with that is the implementation of that being a center. We know that there's policy and then there's implementation. What they're concerned about is how that gets implemented. And we can't necessarily give them that until we have that policy developed. So I'm going to meet with them and say, look, we have a plan, we have some tools, we have the training already. So here's that. So I think more broadly, to answer your question, we are very cognizant of maintaining not just those, but say third-party service rules by the Department of Ed and online program management companies and being concerned. We very much believe in doing things in-house.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the way we are going to make sure that we get our ducks in a row. And if I've learned nothing else from our middle states accreditation, we document, right? Show that you're doing, and then you're assessing what you do. So trying to put all that together in a package, I think, minimizes what some of those potential impacts will be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And understanding exactly what you're speaking about, because we are smack dab in the middle of our middle states accreditation. And that's exactly what it's about. And so moving on to the next question, everyone would love to know how, you obtain growth in an online environment, and what strategies have you initiated to achieve that? Do you have any that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few. I think the first thing, and this is going to sound very basic and maybe very obvious, is that you really need to account for what you have. And here's why I say that is when I came in as then assistant dean, hey, grow enrollment. Well, I don't know what we have. So I went through every single certificate and degree and matched up with the courses that I knew we had. And lo and behold, we didn't know it, but we had 5 or 6, I can't remember the exact number, programs that you could get already online, fully online. Nobody knew that. The only program we knew that was online and it was blended was our nursing program. Like, that was a no. So simply mapping that out and then putting that up on the website. The other process we had was to find a way to publish that on the website, because at that time there was not a lot of money for marketing. So that's the first thing, is you got to get some simple awareness on your college's page that we offer these programs online. So I think now for all of us, that's probably basic. That was 6 or 7 years ago. So then you got to see, if it is mission critical, then you need to think about, well, what's next? Okay, we have these programs. Where would we want to market that? And so the second thing, and we sort of didn't do this in the right order, but the second thing really that needs to be done is folks need to research. Have some, and this would be marketing communications or a business strategy or whatever departments one might have, is to get some research out there to see what are the competitors, what are the jobs, and where's the interest, right? Because you don't want to just say, hey, we've got 20 programs, let's just promote those, when everybody's got an English and everybody's got a business and there's no demand for, whatever it is. So trying to be calculated to say, these would be programs that we think we could market in our area. We just need to make our constituents, right, wherever they are, know, hey, these are programs we offer online. Did you know that? So that's one thing. Then taking that research and saying, we think we have either unique programs or programs that are in demand. And that's what we did. That needs to be the focus of any marketing that occurs beyond your normal marketing area. And so it's taken some time for us to say, this is what we need. And then, of course, it's reliant upon the funding that's available. And that certainly, with all of you that are community colleges, depending on who you are, that's always the challenge. We're never going to be a 4-year institution that has a lot of marketing money. Excuse me. So how do you find the niches to be able to do that? And so we started with a regional campaign in and around Maryland. We did more research and expanded that a little bit more. We actually did find some funding to do some national marketing. And that would be the next thing I would put in, is you need to decide whether that national marketing is going to be generic or specific to programs. Nobody's going to know a CCBC nationally, right? So we started with sort of a very low budget social media, Google search campaign nationally. And that was about, here we are CCBC, we have these programs, and we saw a little bit of traction. And then what we realized is, we need to market the programs. We need to market our unique programs. We need to market anything that might be unique. Whether it's this course has no textbook fees, we're one of 4 in the nation, we are accredited by this association. Find those things, and that's how you market. And in parallel with that, we talk with our department chairs and our folks that are in the know of associations and communities that they work with. So mailing lists, there are advertisements in journals that we can do. Those tend not to be relatively expensive. And just to say, look, we can bring you back for professional development, if that's something that's available for that program you're offering, or share this with a community. Did you know we have this available in an online format? So those are the things we did. And then lastly, and this is where I think, actually 2 things where I think higher ed is going, and that's with partnerships. So from a community college perspective, what we think of as transfer programs, you go from a 2-year to a 4-year. Our provost, Dr. Joaquin Martinez, when he came in right around COVID time, he said we need to take that up a notch, and he created what we have is called Degrees to Succeed. And that basically is pairing with a 4-year institution, and the student becomes a 2-year and a 4-year part of both. And so we know that they can matriculate right over to that 4-year institution, and they have the services. And I think that's the way we're going to see, particularly for some of the smaller community colleges, matching with a 4-year that is able to take those programs and take those credits and transfer them. But the other thing is external partnerships. And in our workforce development area, we have partnerships with a couple of companies that provide us with some coursework. But from a credit perspective, we partnered with Acadium, as I mentioned in the beginning, and they started as a seat sharing. And for those of you that don't know, we do that with Maryland Online as well. If a student needs a course that's not offered at one institution, they could take it at a different institution. And there's some, there's a common fee structure and some other things I won't explain. But that's a nationwide reach for us. So we partnered with them to be able to provide those almost 500 courses to institutions that may need them. And I'm a believer, and I'm working with them now to say, I think we can do what I suggested, these degrees to succeed. We can do that partnership within that company. So take those institutions of higher ed that are working with Acadium, and let's make these 2+2s or 3+1s. Or Acadium works with companies and governments. Let's promote what we do through them to these institutions. We will always serve, from a community college perspective, we will always serve locally, right? And we will stay that way. But for institutions that want to grow beyond that, and that's part of your mission, those partnerships, I think, are the key to doing that in the next 4 or 5 years. And I'm proud to support that Acadian partnership. And I like to think that we are serving the students that would want to come to us no matter where they are.
Absolutely. 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 Great response. And so we've talked about the comprehensive and robust foundation that was set. We talked about the advocacy and now the growth. So can you share, despite all of those efforts that you all are embarking upon and continue to do, what are some significant obstacles that you've encountered along the way?
Yeah. So believe it or not, and my boss will say this, we thought when the president announced this, that our biggest detractors would be the faculty. They would say, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be forced into this. And quite frankly, they were on board with it because so many were trained even at that time, 2016, 17. We had so many classes. There were certainly ones that said, look, we don't want to become that fully online institution, as I mentioned earlier, and we've never gone with that. We've always stuck with that. Where we actually saw the biggest challenges was just the student journey and the technology needed to, and this is for all students, right? And I want to set this up. Actually, I meant to do this earlier. Set this up and say, excuse me, the online student journey is the overall CCBC student journey. We just know that there are some unique things that an online student is not going to be able to do, regardless of whether they're 10 miles from Baltimore, 50 miles from Baltimore, or 2,000 miles from Baltimore, right? They're going to need to be able to do everything virtually. They're going to need expanded hours depending on where they're from. They're going to need dedicated services to that and opportunities such as extracurriculars and esports and things like that to make them fully part of the community. So really our challenges early on were, do we have all those services available? If we have a menu and faculty willing, are we able to serve that student? And we were on a very basic level. You can email exchange, right? So that still took some time to get those answers, to work with the different areas from financial aid to admissions, to student support services, you name it, college life, to see what we have and figure out what that journey is. And so that's been sort of a long way, because then we hit COVID and of course things changed. And so now we are on we've been in this for about 1.5 years now, a comprehensive overview of what our student journey happens to be, literally starting from scratch. And in that journey, we know we're going to get a new website. And I mentioned the new CRM, which we've actually never had a CRM. So CRM, customer relationship manager, it tracks the students through their journey. And so the other barrier to your point is, what data is available, right? How do I, part of mill states is you need to assess what you've done. How do we assess we have success rates for courses, but do we have success rates for students that say they're an online student? Or, oh, by the way, how do we even identify that the student is a fully online student? So those are the things that we're still working through to try and gather so that I don't have a spreadsheet that could probably fill up the wall that's behind me from a size perspective and data. So those are the challenges. But again, because it was part of the strategic plan, we knew that it needed to be done. All the areas knew, but it's just a huge lift for an institution that, 47 to 50,000 students in a given semester, or a given year, that's a heavy lift. So the infrastructure, I would say, and not the learning management system infrastructure, although that obviously was part of this whole package too, but just getting that down. The other thing that we're finding, and I wouldn't call it an obstacle, but it certainly has provided a bit of challenge, has been the idea of how do we quality assure all these courses.
Yeah.
And with that is the idea of, and some people call them blueprint courses, some call them master courses, we call them institutional courses. So it's one course that all the sections that you teach from are from that basic area. And so the faculty have been really good about that. And I want to recognize that through shared governance, we've had two policies that both support and don't support that idea of making all these courses institutional. One is that there needs to be what we call a template, so a simplified version of a course for adjuncts, right? And that just makes sense. When we run 55 online sections of English 101, that's not all taught by full-time faculty, and there needs to be some consistency. At the same time, the faculty voted to say if an institutional course was not appropriate for the discipline, then there can't be one. And so what we've really worked hard over the last year to do is to emphasize to faculty, we don't want a cookie cutter course. I never wanted to teach a cookie cutter course. And any faculty that are listening here, they don't want to teach a cookie cutter course that isn't their materials. They want to be able to teach what they want to teach. And we want that too. And that's a hard hump to get past, because they will say, and have said and do say, if I have to teach from this institutional course, then you're infringing on my academic freedom. And what I try and say is, let's make sure we understand what academic freedom is first off. But what you're really saying to me, and I agree with you, is you want the ability to choose and customize your course in a way that suits you with what you know of, what skills you want to utilize, etc. And we're for that. So we try and work in teams, and we say, provide as much flexibility as you can with a course. And I'm not going to get into all that as to why, because that gets into quality assurance, and I'm sure many of you know that. But the thing is, when you have a quality assurance, no matter what tool you use, there's what everybody knows is alignment. You have to do what you say you're doing in your objectives that were state approved. And to be able to do that, we need to have some consistency. What you do, whether you use PowerPoints or videos or Prezi, or use these animations or these activities, as long as you put them all together in pools so that everybody can pick, great. And so faculty say, yeah, I'm in for that. You got to pay me for my work. And so that's the other obstacle, is how do you manage the development of these courses when it may not be all 50 faculty that teach online? So just recently, again, this is, and I hope this sticks, because we've been lucky enough in our state with some funding, at least last year anyway, we've been able to get a budget to support faculty in developing these courses. So that way they get something for what they do. And we can argue back and forth, is that part of their job responsibilities, all this stuff. It's my opinion that we want to recognize the faculty for their work, even though if they've done it on college time with college resources, the college owns it. But we feel that we still need to recognize those faculty for what they do, because they're putting effort into not just something they're going to teach, but others are going to teach.
And
So Yeah, keep going. Yep,
I'm sorry. You
keep
made a
going.
curious point there around
Yeah,
academic freedom and quality assurance. So a little bit
hmm
off our trajectory here.
yeah,
But I'm interested in learning more about
hmm
how is it that with whether you call it a master course or an
yeah,
institutional course or whatever it is that you might call it, to ensure that there is some alignment across whether it's an adjunct or full-time faculty member. How have you seen that really impacts the student experience? Because I hear you saying that all throughout. That's a theme. You know, we all know
right.
that the student experience should be the focal point of everything that we do, and we build around that. But sometimes when we talk about academic freedom and what that looks like,
hmm
that could look different from one instructor to the next. And so that definitely impacts the student experience. So how have you addressed those types of concerns and issues along the way?
That's a great question. I'm gonna give you a fantastic semi non-answer. I'm kidding.
No,
So
no, no.
so we recognize that it's not just the design of the course, and that's sort of mantra number one, is that developing a course using appropriate online learning pedagogy and having a set of measurements, quality assurance, to check the structure of the course is one step in the total package of success rates. So we did, and this information is still anecdotal because, as I mentioned earlier, data is one of the concerns we're continuing to work on. Is how do you analyze? We can get a breakdown of English as a whole, but we can't necessarily get a breakdown of everybody's sections, although we can get that information. So there's a couple of factors. So one is the data. The second thing is, can we see that when it wasn't, and then when it was quality assured, that there's a difference?
Mhm.
And anecdotally, that has happened in some instances, but it absolutely has not happened in others. One example is a math course. Our math courses, and this is at the faculty's behest, structured, passed, but their success rates still tend to struggle. Um, and that, when you look nationwide at numbers, that's a general theme across the way. So that's one factor. We can't account for the engagement of the faculty member when they're teaching or facilitating the course. And I'm a true believer that is a big factor, because that's what makes a face-to-face course or a remote synchronous or streaming course. That's why those success rates tend to be higher, is that you have that live engagement with them. And that would argue, well, then we should do online courses, but that doesn't serve a need of the population. So how do we get the faculty member? And that's another key to what quality assurance is. It's building in those opportunities for student and faculty engagement or
Mhm.
student to student engagement, but we have to be able to assess that. And that's where we run into a struggle. And that's just part of the way our policies, our shared governance policies are, with when do you do an observation? When are the faculty evaluated? The students evaluate the faculty, but it's an online form, and so you get 10% return rates. That doesn't necessarily hit all of the topics. So that's really that challenge. It's we're trying to find the happy place where all of those pieces of data can inform us more. And I think as we continue to progress through the next couple of years, it's part of my goals to find more data inputs to help us improve those success rates. Quickly to the quality assurance, I don't want to miss part of that question, is that it's hard to do quality assurance for all the sections that we have. And so doing the institutional course, we usually have one person go through it. You can pay Quality Matters. That's the one we use because, we, as part of Maryland Online, we have that opportunity. Um, but paying $1,000 or whatever the price is now to have that course reviewed is not fiscally sustainable. And so the director prior to me actually instituted the internal review, which is the Quality Matters review, just done internally. And so we've been able to review and have courses meet standards almost 30 per year, right? But that still doesn't keep pace. And so this past year, we've revamped that quality assurance process so that it's not three peer reviewers with a subject matter expert. We're actually reducing it to two so that we can get through more. We need to go through 80 courses in a year.
Mhm,
We'll see if I can actually get that done, but that's it. But again, I think it's important to emphasize that, we can look at success rates, we can look at quality assurance. People could say, well, there's other tools that we can use. Why do we even need to have that? We don't do that in our face-to-face courses. We know some of the reasons why online learning courses have lower success rates than face-to-face on the average across the country, right?
mhm,
That's known data. And we can account for a few. So it behooves us to try and manage the ones that we can account for, which would be structure of a course, proper online learning pedagogy, as many opportunities for student to student and student to faculty engagement as we can get, and then try and work then with faculty to see what they do in terms of their actual engagement in the classroom. And that's the best we can do.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great response there. And so, just following along the lines of that whole quality assurance
Mhm.
conversation, how would you define and measure success of your actual online programs, and what key KPIs do you use to track and assess
Yep.
those programs?
Yep. And that's another, I'm going to give you another answer that's a non-answer, which is that's not true. Again, I joke.
No non-answers. Answer
It's
the question.
it's answer. No, and I say that is we know what metrics we want to use. It's
Mhm,
gathering that data. And
mhm,
as I mentioned earlier, that customer relationship manager is going to go a long way to collecting that data. Right now, we have a special application for online programs. And so we see the students come through there. So we could measure application to registration, and we can see, that's one measure of success. Did you get them through the process to actually get them to recognize as an online program? You can see how long does it take for them to complete. 85, 86% of our students are part-time. So
mhm,
you have to account for that, but it varies per. You can look at completion rates within a given program that you're focused on. So we look at that. We've started to distill out the success rates of those individual sections to see. Um, but we know, for example, we'll take American Sign Language and Deaf Studies is one of our unique programs. And the English, the first two courses are 101 and 102. And they have an extremely high DFW rate. And the
mhm,
reason is it's a gen ed course that any student can take. And you've got students in that are, sorry, you have faculty that are deaf faculty that are teaching that, and the native and students are thrown off by that.
mhm,
You look now at the next couple of courses, which are majors level courses, and you see that success rate elevate. But if you look at the program as a whole, it's weighed down a little bit. So distilling out some of those gen ed courses and students are there is one way that we can also measure that.
mhm,
So it's completion, it's looking at the individual courses, it's how many stop outs might there be in that given program. And so we've got some snippets of that, but to be able to put it together in a bigger picture, we still need that data. And we're actually working on some dashboards right now that will assist with some of that. Hopefully they're going to be done in the next month or so. So I can start to really take a look at that and see where some of the pressure points are, or where we need to go in and make a boost, or any number of these factors, or where we've got an opportunity to market or an opportunity to partner
mhm.
with institutions because we do have some of those success. How can we distill out some of those numbers for those particular students?
Absolutely.
So that's a challenge when you're not even able to identify that student automatically that they are, yes, I'm in a program. So my goal, just to finish this off, the goal would be to have cohorts, a set of number of students, 10 if you will, that are going to enter at the same time, and we can track those students as we go through. I mean, you all can imagine, many of you are in community college, the challenge that poses when the part-time students, they may not start right away, they have challenges paying, et cetera, all of those factors.
Mhm.
So to get a cohort to go through, we see it in healthcare. They're certainly there, and that's a high demand program. So as
Absolutely.
we start to see the enrollments come in, I think that's going to also help serve us to understand more of what those prime indicators are for success.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. And so being sensitive to allowing the audience an opportunity to
Mhm,
ask you some questions, I will wrap up with this last question.
mhm.
Looking ahead, what are the key strategies or initiatives you plan to implement to further enhance the effectiveness and accessibility of online learning at CCBC?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And thanks for those questions coming in. Man, that went quickly, that time frame. Um, Certainly finding best ways for data. So data dashboards is task number one. Number two is that online student journey, and that's going to take a little bit of time because I really want those students to be able to experience CCBC wherever they are. And so that's really into the college life area. Um, the quality assurance is a huge initiative for us to get that rolling. We piloted in the spring. We're going to launch it full time in the fall. And so that's going to be a big key. And Accessibility, you mentioned accessibility. We purchased a tool to help with that, getting this policy passed. And then really, this is not an online learning thing. This is a college wide, right? Everybody uses the LMS. Just the opportunity that anybody that's taking a course has the opportunity to complete that course from a digital accessibility perspective is really a key thing for me too. So um, add in the can we get some data on our marketing and how successful we are on that, and we're off to the races.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Steve, for engaging with me today on this
Thank you,
most
Renee.
important topic, online learning and distance learning. It has been a pleasure to be able to interview you. Shinta, I would like to open the floor for any questions that the audience may have for Steve and myself.
I'm sure this didn't tweak anybody's interest, right? No questions.
I have a question. Um, I'm at Montgomery College and I teach mathematics. And Brian uh, and I work closely together. And excuse me, Barry and I work close together, bouncing ideas off one another to engage students. One of the problems that we find, and I think this is a systematic problem around the country, it's getting students to do homework. And any suggestions that you have found or can come up with that can engage us, to engage the students to participate more in homework?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I will just say nothing concrete, but I know that I've worked with the math folks. We work more on sort of the proctor assessment piece, but since I worked in that school, we've had conversations. It's really about you're always going to get that sort of that general population of students that most are, but some won't, and some are timing. And I think what we've talked about is trying to get to know the student early on, to try and get a personal connection with that student if you can. Now, granted, the students that you don't get that personal connection with are probably most likely the ones that are not going to end up doing the homework. But for those that are in between, making that personal, and this really goes to the facilitation piece I said earlier. You can have the best software, you can have the best scripted exercises, but providing that personal connection and providing as much virtual opportunity, you know, office hours that work for them to do one-on-one with them, that's what my math folks have noticed has made some difference. But again, it's hard when there's so much going on, and you know, math science dean is my former dean, and we hear folks in other areas of college go, everybody hates math, but math is life. So it's getting past that barrier. If you can connect with them right away, personally, hopefully that engages them.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I just want to chime in before we go to Nadine, and then Javon also
Mhm.
has a question in the chat. To your question, David and Steve, I really like the idea of having that personable connections early on so students can feel that they can relate to you and talk with you. I think another piece that can supplement all of that is to have these virtual academic wraparound support services and
Yes.
making our students know them and just encouraging them to go to the libraries, to go to the learning center, go to the tutors, whether it's
Math
in
lab.
person or
Yep.
virtual. I do that
Yes,
also. They might need our nudge a little bit, but if
yes.
they know we're nudging, they might be more inclined to go.
And we do that. And we do that. Here's one last thing I ask. Is it possible to have a dialogue with your math faculty and our faculty so we can maybe once a month get together and have a dialogue to bounce ideas, because our overall objective is student success?
Mhm. Yeah, Shinta and I can talk offline. I know there's a math affinity group within Maryland, and they talk about all those factors. I think incorporating, I don't know how that works. I think incorporating that into there and having that be your jumping off point is the best way to go.
I would love that.
Great question. Thank you. What do you say, Shinta? Nadine, I think you're up.
Oh, thank you. And first of all, I just want to, you gave me some interesting insight, and you guys come out of the enrollment department. I come from a school where our department is based in IT. I've been at a school where it's based in TLSS. So one of the things that really occurred to me, a challenge we are having at my institution, is the strategic plan for developing online courses is everywhere, everything, all the time. It's a movie, but apparently it's a problem in online learning now. So I just wanted to let you know, I really appreciated how you described the strategy of, so what we decided, the first thing we needed to do is let's take a look at what we have. Let's take a look at what's out there and what we need. And then coming back and then saying, now let's have a plan that's based on what the college needs, not an individual person wants or needs.
Yeah.
Did it take, so I just want to be clear, I understand it does take a couple years, but now that you're a couple years in, is it really starting to click with people? Are they starting to it, or right? Because I mean, I think one of our biggest challenges is we spend so much time arguing about whether it's a good thing to do, we never do it.
Yeah. And I would just say, be cognizant of time. Our president still wants us to be exploded out there, right? And we have to rein her in for all of her energy to say, we have to do this in a strategic way. And that's what you just have to convince folks. So I think your question is internally, right? Has everybody bought in? Yes, everybody has bought into what we're doing, because especially from an enrollment management perspective, it's everybody's involved in some way, shape, or form. And we're a little facet, along with international students and the Male Student Success Initiative and ECAP and all that. So when you put it that way, we're seeing it. But we're seeing those fruits come through with the enrollments of take our interpreter prep and ASL. We've got 42 students that are out of state between those two programs. We wouldn't have had that before. Now, that's a very unique program. It's relatively small, but it's proof of concept.
No, and no, I appreciate that, because I think one of our challenges is, right, trying to figure out what are the priorities and, what are the things we're going to compete with in our county, outside of our county, and just really putting some, my other concern too is we have students right now who are also calling for a lot of face-to-face courses and having what we are hearing post-COVID is not students just want online. What they want is choice.
Yes.
So,
and we recognize that too. We made that decision earlier on because that's what we saw. Yep. That's what we saw.
Thank you so much. This was very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're ready to go. I want to thank everybody. I appreciate the time. Renee, wonderful job. Shinta, thank you so much for the invitation.
There are two more questions, Steve, if you don't mind, if they're going to.
I'm happy to hang.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So one is from Javon. He's saying, great presentation. What are some innovative approaches or emerging trends that you foresee shaping the future of online education? And then there are two more after that, and then we'll.
Yeah. Well, the trends are going to be, in my perspective, artificial intelligence on multiple levels is going to play a role in that. And that is artificial intelligence in terms of how courses are created, right? There's companies that can do that, as well as artificial intelligence and how that's incorporated into the classroom. And that is from how do we teach proper use of, how is it evaluated within the courses all across the board, right? Every discipline is going to have something that AI can have an influence on. So the trend for me is going to be, how do we maximize that and utilize that and teach that? I mean, that's a very current barrier right now for everybody. Everybody's experiencing it, and it's trying to max. That's not going away. And I think the last trend I would say is that just you're going to see a winnowing down, and you're seeing a winnowing down of these smaller institutions. And I think you're going to see more partnering of these institutions, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's the way things are going to be, whether it's 2 years combining, not like one entity, but some consortial entity, or 2 years to 4 years.
Absolutely. And then Anastine, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, had two questions. And so one
Mhm.
was related to artificial intelligence and
Mhm.
the impact on learning accountability. And then her second question was, what are the experiences around proctoring exams in the online environment?
Ooh. So I think to the first one, right? I'll just say what I said, which was we've got to learn more about it and learn how to utilize that. And a quick anecdote: I was at a conference in Boston, and it was on AI, and it was a faculty member for University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She teaches law. She was going to come in. I thought she was going to give us the do's and don'ts, and she right away said, "It's not going away. We have to learn to recognize and educate and work it in, because what's the difference between AI and having somebody proofread your essay you just created, other than, of course, both could rewrite your paper." Okay, so how do we utilize that? The second, proctoring, and Dr. Terrain's question earlier about math. I mean, proctoring is a big deal, and that's still something we are struggling with as well. We have a service. It's a relatively basic service. It doesn't work for disciplines like math, the higher level math, where you have to do solutions. Um, I think that proctoring really needs to be part and parcel with what the faculty do in some way, shape, or form, and that we need to recognize and understand faculty need to do that, or we need to get our own folks to be able to do that, because AI is not enough, because that's what those are. And proctoring is about deterrence, right? Any of the tools that you use is about deterrence. It is not going to catch them, but it's a big deal. And so we just had an incident where our tool found the video found that the student was able to see a different website, even though we had that blocked. We don't know how that happened. So, alternative assessments are the way we promote a lot of that as well, but it's going to be an ongoing piece. So I don't have a great answer for you, but it's something we recognize and struggle with.
That was
Anything
the
else?
final question, Shinta. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, Steve and Renee, what a fantastic session that you provided for us this morning. I think a lot of us here have shared so many of the takeaways that we got from this presentation. I certainly took a lot of notes myself. We appreciate your sharing your wisdom, Steve, and the experiences you had at CCBC. And
Yeah.
Renee, fantastic facilitation. We appreciate all the
Yes.
questions that you offered for us all to consider even. So thanks to all of you for being here at this MOLLI webinar opportunity. Please be on the lookout for future MOLLI PDs, and we hope to see all of you there. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.